So we've all heard about the absolute horror of the Black Death. I mean, a catastrophe that literally changed the world. But today, we're not looking at what happened during the plague. Nope, we're on a different mission. We're asking a way more interesting question. After a disaster that huge, what on earth happens next? Let's get into it.
Okay, just so we're all on the same page, the Black Death wiped out up to half of England's entire population. Think about that. In just a few years, the country's population dropped from maybe 5 million people down to around 2.5 million. Half the people just gone.
So what happens to a country when the slate is wiped that clean? You'd probably expect total chaos, right? Utter collapse. But the truth is, well, it's a lot weirder, more complicated, and for the people who actually survived, surprisingly good. This is the mystery we're cracking today. And our investigation kicks off with the biggest, most immediate shock to the system: money, power, and a total shift in who was calling the shots. See, before 1348, life for a regular peasant was really tough. The lords held all the cards. If you complained about how little you were paid, well, there were 10 other guys desperate for work who would happily take your job for even less. You were totally replaceable. And then the plague hit. All of a sudden, those 10 replacements were gone. But the fields still needed plowing, the crops still needed harvesting. And for the first time in, centuries, it was the workers who had the power. The result? It was insane. Between 1349 and 1400, the wages for farm workers basically doubled. Now, you can imagine the government, which was, of course, run by all the rich landowners. They were not happy about this, not one bit. So they tried to slam on the brakes. In 1351, they passed this big, serious law, the Statute of Labourers, saying everything had to go back to the good old low-wage days. And it was a total flop. I mean, it was almost completely ignored. Because here's the thing. You can pass all the laws you want, but you still need someone to bring in your harvest. The lords had absolutely no choice. They had to pay up. And this new power just completely shattered the old system of serfdom. Now, serfdom was this thing where peasants were basically the property of their lord, legally tied to the land. You couldn't just leave. But now, if your lord wasn't paying you enough, you could just walk off and find one who would. And by the year 1500, about 150 years after the plague, serfdom had pretty much vanished from England. A system that had lasted for centuries crumbled in just a couple of generations. But this wasn't just about money. All that new cash and new freedom, it started to change how people thought. It changed how they saw themselves and their place in the world. With this new confidence, peasants started demanding more rights. The ruling class, of course, pushed back, trying to claw that money back with really unpopular taxes. And just 33 years after the plague's peak, that pressure cooker exploded into the Peasants Revolt of 1381. The Black Death basically set the stage for it perfectly. All right, our next line of investigation takes us to the biggest, most powerful organization in medieval Europe. Because right after the peasants found their power, the church was about to take a massive hit. Just look at that number. 45%. Let that sink in. That's how many of England's clergy, priests, bishops, the lot, died during the plague. Nearly half of the church's entire staff gone. And this caused a huge crisis of faith. I mean, for the first time, ordinary people started asking these really difficult, really uncomfortable questions. If the church speaks for God, why didn't prayer work? Why did God let his own priests die just as often as everyone else? And there were no good answers. These questions didn't just fade away. They planted the seeds for huge religious changes down the line, even helping to set the stage for the Protestant Reformation. So medieval medicine was, let's be honest, completely useless against the plague. Everybody could see that. But out of that total failure came an idea so good. We are still using it today. Yeah, you know this one. Back in 1377, the city of Venice figured out that if they made ships wait offshore for 40 days, a quarantino in Italian, it seemed to stop new outbreaks from starting. Sound familiar to anyone? But here's the hilarious part. Understanding why quarantine actually worked, that took a little while. Germ theory didn't come along until the 1860s, and the actual bug that caused the plague wasn't identified until 1894. That is 546 years later. When half the people you've ever known die in just a few years, it's gonna change you. It changes how you see the world, how you pray, and it turns out, how you make art.
This new style of art started popping up, called the dance macabre, or the dance of death. It would show skeletons dancing away with everybody, from kings and popes to poor farmers. The message was dark, but it was crystal clear. Death doesn't care who you are. It's the one thing that gets us all in the end.
So here's the big takeaway. The Black Death was a horrifying catastrophe, no question, but it also hit a giant reset button on a society that was really rigid and unfair. It kickstarted more freedom, better pay, and even the start of a new middle class, the kind of people Geoffrey Chaucer was writing about. The old world was gone for good. But wait, there's more. The world after the plague was full of all these weird and wonderful details that are just too good to skip. First off, that word quarantine is almost 650 years old. An idea from 1377 that we all got very friendly with recently, though I'm guessing they didn't complain about it quite so much on social media. And get this, the worker shortage got so wild that some lords started kidnapping workers. I'm not kidding. They'd show up with armed men to literally steal peasants from their neighbor's land. Can you imagine? Fighting over workers like they were the last turkey in the supermarket before Christmas.
All right, detectives, you have heard all the evidence. Now let's see what you remember from our investigation. It is time for a knowledge check.
Question 1. What happened to farm workers' wages between 1349 and 1400? They basically doubled. Medieval supply and demand. Question 2. What was the 1351 Statute of Labourers supposed to do? It was meant to force wages back down to pre-plague levels, and it failed spectacularly. And question 3. By about what year had serfdom disappeared from England? By around 1500. The plague totally sped up its collapse.
Okay, final round. Question 4. What was the dance macabre in post-plague art? It was that theme showing death coming for everyone equally, rich or poor. Question 5. Which city came up with quarantine back in 1377? That was Venice, with its clever 40-day rule. And last one, number 6. How did the Black Death weaken the church's authority? Because when people saw that holy priests were dying at the exact same rate as everyone else, they started to wonder if the church really had a special connection to God after all. The plague was a tragedy that killed millions, but for those who survived, it forced a rigid world to change in ways no one could have ever predicted. It really makes you wonder, what other unexpected changes might be hiding in the wake of the big events of our own time?